Rick, good to see you.
Oh, good morning, Keith. Always great to be with you. What's on tap for today?
I want to share a little story, and we're going to title this one called "I Come a Long Way." And this is inspired by my friend Mick. Mick he's an adult now. When I met him, he was 14 years old. His parents introduced me to him, hoping that the way that we show up in ToBeRe would benefit him. He was always a really successful young person. He was a star at school academically as well as athletically. And there were a couple of things that they thought that he could benefit from and working on as an only child. And so they introduced him to me, and he, really kind of got, group in a way that was different than the sports he was playing. And that the sports he was playing was about competition. How can I beat out the next person, stuff like that. Whereas in ToBeRe, it's about inspiring the person with how you show up, with how kind you are and thoughtful and, invested in them doing well and meeting their goals. And so he benefited a lot from that. But one of the things he said that he also benefited from was something that he learned from me over those years. So I was in this life, on a regular basis for about 4 or 5 years while he was going through, high school, middle school, and high school, and then he went off to college. And in his first year of college, being away from his parents, we would talk on the phone once a week, preparing him for that, just adapting to a new environment, new culture, new life experiences. And then we have maintained that connection all these years. And he's been out of school for at least 3 years now, out of college. And so he still lives in Austin, Texas. So we check on each other all the time. We call each other. And so most recently, he was telling me about how at age 13, I shared a story about being delayed at the airport and accepting the delay. And I don't remember telling him this at age 13, but apparently, it was back then I was, working on my practice or beginning to. And he said the story really helped him when he was stranded in New York for 3 days after he had just was returning back to the States from Europe. And it was just really like inspiring to me that the way that I was showing up was having this kind of effect on him. And when he was in a similar situation, he found that to be informative for how he was going to treat that moment too, of being, stranded in New York for 3 days without the first night, not having a place to stay, and just navigating that and making the most of it. And he said to me, "It's like I'm going to be here anyway. I might as well not make it a problem." And so that was really, really awesome. And then when I was in Yosemite, most recently with our friend Pete, Pete commented on how different I was from the first trip that we took, which was about 5 years ago when I was still early in my practice, and how even now I'm even more peaceful, making things less of a problem even now. And so, the title of this again is, I've come a long way, and I'm grateful for that. And I think part of that being able to come a long way is just being really grateful, that I have been inspired by, my good friends like you and authors and teachers to really make this a lifelong commitment, understanding what life would be like without this kind of commitment of staying on this path and working on myself each and every day. And I think the other reason that I've been able to come a long way with still more miles to go before I sleep, to quote Robert Frost, is that I treat everything that happens in the present moment as an opportunity to work on myself. And I think that's what continues to help me, practice Kaizen as you defined it, which is continuing to make steady progress and not taking a step back. So what are your thoughts, Rick, about this theme and what I shared about I've come a long way?
I think the practice has lots of benefits. The first one of which is inner peace, a sense of calmness, a sense of being centered. That allows you to fight all kinds of battles that you need to fight in your career or elsewhere. And I think it's important to keep in mind that your first responsibility is to yourself.
Mm,
And I'm not talking necessarily just about self-love. I'm talking about self-improvement all the time. And the
yes.
idea is that you never get to the goal. It's a treadmill. If you picture it like, let's say, a long conveyor belt, or one of the jogging machines at the gym, that's life, and your steps are your ways of dealing with life, and you can do that in a frenetic way. You can do it with a controlled intensity. You can do it lackadaisically. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to cut the cake, but the idea is that the conveyor belt's going to keep rolling, and you can either be left behind and left miserable, or you can get on a program that will allow you to steadily become more and more centered and more the person that you want to be. So I think I've noticed the same things about you. You know, you've dropped all of the need to be right, you know, about things like if the plane isn't leaving on time, or if the room is too small, or if, you know, the food is cold. Those little things are just little things that you can either make a big deal out of or let go. And I point those out just to show that in the daily run of life, we have many opportunities to be frustrated and our buttons pushed. And if you notice, for me, when I notice that when my buttons are being pushed, then that means that I'm off the path. That means that there's something that I need to attend to, and it's not doing me any good to be where I'm at.
Yeah, absolutely, Rick. Just for sake of an example, how has this applied to your work, you know, in the legal field, you know, your growth and how you handle things now versus, you know, before you started working on yourself?
Oh boy. Well, I'd like to think I'm more effective because I have better boundaries than I did when I was a younger lawyer. When I was a younger lawyer, it seemed like I would take on the person's legal problem as my own problem, you know, as if it
Right.
happened to my son, or to my brother, or to my father, or whatever. And so the boundaries have been number one. And then number two, I have to keep in mind that I'm dealing with a very volatile, difficult set of circumstances when you're involved in defending somebody, or you're involved with representing somebody who's been wronged and you're trying to get justice. Those things are incredibly freighted with pressure. And so I learned early on that if I was going to last in this profession, that I'd have to make a clear demarcation between myself and what I do. So as a
Mhm.
result, I think I'm
I love
more,
that.
I think I'm more focused. I can be more focused with less of a commitment of worry and anxiety and all the rest that I normally would have if it were my personal problem. I think everybody who's involved in some sort of a service business has to do that, right? Because I don't know how in the world you can get through it. I don't know how a psychologist, for example, could deal with trying to help somebody who has some severe neuroses or even a psychosis that you know, that they're trying to cure or stabilize, without getting into some sort of personal commitment that really takes you down the wrong path.
Yeah, I totally agree, Rick. And I've seen it show up for me too. And I'm just forever grateful that I started working on myself. You know, sometimes people will say to me, I wish I'd done this earlier. Well, you weren't ready earlier, you know.
Yeah,
In
that's
my
right.
case, in
That's
my
right.
case, I hadn't suffered enough. And what I'm grateful for is that I did get it, you know, beginning at age 44, and it wasn't 84 that I finally got it. and I and I was taking my last draw of breath when I finally got it, right? Because
Yeah.
that would have been 84 years of nothing but suffering. At least I started to minimize and mitigate the suffering, you know, at 44, you know, and more every day, as long as I stay on this path, the suffering reduces more and more and more. And part of that is just being aware. Just the awareness is the most important thing, right?
Awareness, and the idea that you have a choice at every
Yes,
crossroads. Every problem gives you a crossroads, and you can take the, you know, beat my chest and scream and complain and,
yes,
you know, and be a complete idiot that really works yourself up, or you can accept it.
right,
And we've said many times on this show that it's very important not to mistake the idea of detachment from not wanting to change things, or not wanting to stick up for yourself, or not wanting to fight a battle that you believe in that reflects a core value. That's a different issue. What
right, right,
we're talking about is something that is maintaining a way of thinking and a way of feeling and a way of moving through the world where your primary focus is on remaining calm and as and detached and self-oriented, so that you know you can count on yourself in every situation.
I love it, Rick. Thank you so much, Rick. I love you.